The wind whispered through the dense pine forest, carrying with it a faint metallic scent, blood. Ethan Shaw lay flat on his stomach, face half buried in the cold dirt, his breathing shallow and measured. His right eye peered through the scope of his custom sniper rifle, finger resting lightly on the trigger. 120 yards away, something moved, shimmered, like heat rippling off desert sand. Whatever it wasn't human. Ethan's instincts screamed danger, but he remained still, barely daring to blink. The shimmering outline twisted, revealing faint outlines, humanoid legs, a distorted head, and something flickering like a pulsating core in its chest. It was studying the clearing, as if searching for something, or someone. The thing reached for a curved weapon on its back, and that's when Ethan fired. The bullet cut through the air, slicing toward its target, and then, the creature twisted unnaturally fast. The shimmering figure dodged the shot just enough for the bullet to graze its arm. The air seemed to fracture, the distorted cloak flickering like static before stabilizing again. Then it turned, directly facing Ethan's position. "Shit!" Ethan whispered. The thing vanished in a blur. Ethan rolled hard to the side just as a sizzling spear of energy pierced the tree trunk behind him. The bark erupted in flames. Ethan scrambled to his feet, firing 2 more shots in rapid succession toward the faint distortion dancing through the forest. Both shots missed. A cold chill crawled down his spine. This thing was fast, too fast. Suddenly, something struck him hard across the chest, knocking him flat. His rifle skittered away, lost in the underbrush. Struggling to draw breath, Ethan reached for his sidearm. The air in front of him flickered, and then the thing's face appeared, sharp, angular features with reptilian eyes that glowed like molten gold. A cruel smile stretched across its twisted mouth. The creature clicked its tongue and raised its curved blade. Ethan felt his fingers close around his pistol. He swung it up and fired. The bullet struck the creature's core, the flickering pulse, and its cloaking field failed. The alien's body shimmered and solidified, revealing an armored warrior nearly 7 feet tall. It staggered back, clutching its chest, and collapsed. Ethan rolled over, gasping. His ribs ached, and the cold sweat pouring down his back wasn't just from exertion, it was fear. He knew what he just fought wasn't some rogue terrorist, or advanced mercenary. This was something far worse. Hours later, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, still clutching a whiskey glass like it was his lifeline. The encounter replayed in his mind. The precision of the attack, the flickering stealth technology, the creature's unnatural speed, none of it made sense. But one thing was certain, Earth wasn't alone anymore. The knock on the door startled him. Ethan stood slowly, grabbing the shotgun from beside the wall. He cracked the door open to find Captain Linda Torres standing there, her face hard as stone. "We need to talk," she said without greeting. Moments later, Torres stood in his living room, flipping open a tablet. Grainy surveillance footage flickered across the screen, blurred figures emerging from shadows, slaughtering soldiers with curved blades and disappearing into thin air. Footage showed a power plant in flames, a military convoy turned to ash, and finally, the twisted face of the creature Ethan had killed. "They've hit 6 sites in 2 weeks," Torres said. "Critical defense points, communication hubs, energy grids. Each time, they leave no survivors. They're using some kind of stealth tech," Ethan muttered. "Not just tech. Intel believes they're alien, advanced species called the Dravniks. Earth's satellites barely pick up their movements. We've lost 3 sniper squads trying to counter them. They know our tactics." Ethan set his glass down, hard. "I'm not coming back," he said. Torres exhaled. "I know you blame yourself for Moscow." Her voice softened. "But this isn't just some war, they're targeting everything we need to survive. I'm done with this," Ethan snapped. "Whatever this is, find someone else." Torres stared at him for a long moment, then turned toward the door. "A village was hit 2 days ago," she said over her shoulder. "Near the ridge." She paused. "The Parker family's missing." Ethan's hand tightened on his glass. Ben Parker had been his neighbor for years, one of the few people who'd treated Ethan like something more than just a sniper with a troubled past. Without another word, Ethan grabbed his gear. By nightfall, Ethan knelt on a rocky outcrop overlooking the Parker family's property. The house was in ruins, scorch marks streaked the walls, and shattered windows gaped like empty eyes. In the dim moonlight, something flickered near the tree-line, a faint distortion, shifting like liquid glass. Ethan steadied his breathing and adjusted his rifle. The shimmering figure knelt beside a ruined shed, lifting a small device from the rubble, some sort of tracker. Ethan carefully centered the crosshairs on the creature's chest, lining up with its faintly pulsing core. A whisper of movement caught his eye, a second figure. Then a third. Ethan's stomach sank. The Dravniks weren't just scouting, they were hunting. Ethan exhaled slowly, adjusting his aim. The nearest target, 20 meters closer, moved with unnatural grace, blending into the trees like a shadow. Ethan shifted the crosshairs, calculating the timing. 1 shot, 2 seconds to reload, another shot, if he was lucky. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then the scream came, a child's cry from somewhere deeper in the woods. The Parker kids. Ethan swore under his breath, pulling his rifle back and slinging it over his shoulder. He slipped down the rocky slope, moving fast but silent. Each step felt like a gamble. Dry branches threatened to snap beneath his boots. The scream came again, louder this time. A figure stepped out ahead, one of the Dravnik's warriors. It paused, sensing something. Ethan drew his sidearm and fired before it could react. The bullet hit its chest, the cloak flickering briefly before stabilizing. The creature stumbled, growling in a low, guttural tone. Ethan darted past it, weaving through the trees. He spotted the Parker kids, Sam and Julie, huddled behind a fallen log. The third Dravnik stood above them, blade raised. "Hey!" Ethan barked. The creature turned, and Ethan fired, 2 clean shots. The first shattered the thing's hand, sending the blade spinning. The second punched through its core. "Run!" Ethan barked, motioning to the kids. They bolted toward him as the wounded creature groaned on the ground. The remaining Dravniks emerged from the trees. Ethan grabbed a smoke grenade from his belt and yanked the pin. The forest filled with blinding white haze as he hustled the children towards safety. They reached his truck just as the smoke began to thin. The Dravniks were gone, but Ethan knew they'd be back. Later that night, as Ethan cleaned his rifle, Captain Torres called again. "We've confirmed your sighting," she said. "We think they're building something, a jamming device strong enough to blind satellites. If they finish it, we won't see them coming." Ethan stared at his rifle, the faint memory of that twisted grin haunting his thoughts. He closed his eyes and sighed. "Count me in," he said. The cold wind gnawed at Ethan's face as he crouched in the dense forest, his rifle steady against his shoulder. The Parker kids were safe now, but the threat had escalated. The Dravniks were more organized than he'd realized, moving with military precision, and whatever they were building would cripple Earth's ability to track them. He couldn't let that happen. Ethan scanned the valley below, where the faint shimmer of distorted air rippled like water against the moonlit trees. He knew better now, those distortions weren't heat waves, but cloaked soldiers moving in coordinated patrols. The Dravniks weren't just hunting, they were protecting something. He adjusted his scope, shifting his aim to the cluster of figures near a partially buried metal structure, a makeshift command post. Wires snaked from the device, branching out toward the treetops. They were setting up a transmitter, one powerful enough to disrupt satellite surveillance. His finger hovered over the trigger when he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Instinct screamed at him to move. He shifted his position just as a crackling energy spear shot past his shoulder, slicing a deep groove into the tree beside him. Rolling onto his side, Ethan fired blindly toward the distortion in the air. The crack of his rifle was followed by a pained snarl, and the figure staggered back, its cloak failing. The Dravnik soldier clutched its side, dark fluid leaking between its fingers. Ethan had no time to celebrate the kill. More distortions were shifting around him, closing in. He bolted through the trees, zigzagging to avoid energy blasts that scorched the earth behind him. He dove into a shallow trench just as two figures appeared above him. Their glowing eyes flickered in the dark, and one reached for its blade. Ethan yanked a flashbang from his belt, pulled the pin, and hurled it upward. The explosion of light seared his vision even with his eyes shut, but the pained screeches from above told him it worked. He scrambled away, cursing under his breath. They were faster than anything he'd faced before, and if he couldn't outthink them, he wouldn't last long. Hours later, Ethan sat in the ruins of an abandoned ranger station, patching a gash on his arm with duct tape and gauze. Blood seeped slowly from the wound, but he ignored the pain. His mind was on what he'd seen, that transmitter in the clearing. If the Dravniks finished setting it up, Earth's satellites would be blind to their movements. He couldn't afford to wait. The pounding in his skull dulled his thoughts, but he pushed through it. He needed a plan, fast. A faint rustling caught his ear. His hand shot to his sidearm as a shadow moved outside the broken window. The figure stumbled into view, a Dravnik soldier, but this one looked injured. Its cloak flickered erratically, barely holding its form. The creature slumped against a tree, breathing heavily. "Stay down!" Ethan barked, gun raised. "I am not your enemy," the creature rasped, its voice guttural yet oddly clear. It clutched its side, dark fluid dripping between its fingers. "I know what they're building." Ethan's finger twitched on the trigger. "Why should I believe you?" "Because if they finish it," the creature gasped, "Earth will fall before you can fight back." Ethan kept his gun raised but allowed the creature to speak. The Dravniks identified itself as Vale, a scout who had abandoned the warlord's cause. Vale claimed the device in the clearing was more than just a jamming beacon. It was designed to mask orbital movements, hiding incoming warships from Earth's sensors. More Dravniks' forces were preparing for an assault, and unless the transmitter was destroyed, the planet wouldn't even see them coming. Ethan considered his options. Trusting an alien defector was insanity, but Vale's information made sense. He knew the Dravniks had never struck in numbers this large, not unless something bigger was on its way. Reluctantly, Ethan agreed to listen. Vale explained that the Dravniks' cloaking technology had a weakness. Electromagnetic pulses could destabilize their shields. With the right equipment, Ethan could expose the hidden patrols and strike from a distance. The next evening, Ethan knelt on a rocky ridge overlooking the clearing. Vale had provided coordinates to several patrol paths and showed him where the transmitter's power source was located, a fusion core shielded beneath layers of scrap metal. Destroying it would cripple the beacon, but the core was guarded by two elite Dravnik sentinels. Ethan knew he couldn't take them all on in direct combat. Instead, Ethan crafted makeshift EMP grenades using broken radios, copper wiring, and battery cells from abandoned vehicles. It wasn't elegant, but it would have to work. He spent the afternoon planting them across the patrol routes. As night fell, he waited for his moment. The first Dravnik's patrol passed his hiding spot. Ethan triggered the EMP. The shimmering distortions flickered out of existence, revealing 3 armored warriors. Before they could react, Ethan's rifle barked 3 times. 3 bodies hit the ground. The second patrol heard the shots and moved to intercept. Ethan detonated another EMP grenade, then fired a shot that sparked against one of their energy weapons, igniting it in a violent explosion. Smoke and flame consumed the patrol, giving Ethan the opening he needed. He moved swiftly toward the transmitter, keeping low. The 2 elite sentinels guarded the core as expected. These warriors were larger, their armor heavier and reinforced. If Ethan was going to take them down, he had one shot, and it had to be perfect. Crawling onto an overlook, Ethan steadied his rifle. He adjusted his aim, calculating the wind and the distance. The first sentinel shifted, and Ethan fired. The bullet hit the creature's chest, but instead of going down, the armor sparked and held. The sentinel roared and turned toward Ethan's position. Cursing, Ethan fired again, this time targeting the power cables snaking out from the fusion core. The shot severed the line, and sparks erupted from the transmitter. The remaining sentinel charged up the slope, energy blade crackling. Ethan had no time to reload. He grabbed his last EMP grenade, twisting the wires together just as the towering warrior reached him. The blast went off point-blank, throwing both of them backward. Ethan hit the ground hard, vision swimming. The sentinel stumbled, its armor flickering as the cloaking field sputtered out. Ethan's hand found his pistol, and he fired twice. The sentinel crumpled. The transmitter's core sputtered violently, crackling with unstable energy before exploding in a shower of sparks. The forest lit up as the remaining Dravnik's warriors retreated, their cloaks flickering uselessly. Ethan lay on his back, breathing heavily as smoke drifted through the trees. The immediate threat was over, but Vale's warning still echoed in his mind. They weren't just preparing Earth for an invasion. The war was already coming, and the transmitter was only the beginning. The morning sky was heavy with smoke as Ethan surveyed the scorched clearing where the Dravnik's transmitter once stood. The wreckage still crackled with dying embers, the air thick with the scent of burnt metal and ozone. He knew the victory was temporary. Destroying the transmitter had only delayed the inevitable. The Dravniks weren't finished, and whatever force they were summoning was still on its way. He couldn't win this alone. By mid-afternoon, Ethan was standing in a fortified outpost deep in the forest, a forgotten military base buried beneath layers of brush and rusted barbed wire. Captain Torres' team had already arrived, assembling defensive positions and reinforcing the perimeter. The base had been abandoned for years, but its walls were still strong, and the underground bunker provided enough shelter to survive an assault, if they could hold it. Captain Torres greeted Ethan with a grim nod. "Word from command is bad," she said, her voice tight. "We've confirmed an unidentified craft moving into low orbit. Satellite visuals went dark an hour ago. Whatever they're planning, it's coming fast." Ethan's gaze shifted to the horizon. The forest seemed unnaturally still, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. "They're testing us," he muttered. "Pushing us until we make a mistake. That's why we need you here," Torres said. "If they're hiding troops in this area, you're our best shot at spotting them before they strike." Ethan knew better than to argue. He spent the evening mapping the surrounding ridges, identifying key vantage points where he could watch for movement. He felt a familiar comfort when he lay prone in the dirt, his rifle steady in his hands. The stillness calmed his mind, letting him focus on the math, the wind, the bullet's trajectory. There was no room for doubt in the silence, only the target and the trigger. Nightfall brought the first sign of trouble. A distant flicker of distorted air rippled through the trees, too faint to track with the naked eye but unmistakable through Ethan's scope. He steadied his breath, watching the distortion creep closer. 3 figures shifted through the brush, moving low and careful. They knew how to stalk, how to hide their steps beneath the sounds of the forest. But they weren't perfect. Ethan squeezed the trigger. The first shot struck the lead figure in the chest, the bullet punching through its flickering shield. The creature staggered back before collapsing. The second shot struck the figure beside it. The third vanished into the dark before Ethan could get a clean shot. Moments later, the trillion erupted with glowing orbs of energy, streaking toward the base like falling stars. Explosions rocked the ground, shaking the walls. Shouts rang out from the soldiers below as they scrambled for cover. Ethan ignored the chaos, keeping his eye on the distant hillside. More distortions were moving, too many to count. Ethan radioed down to Torres. "They're flanking both sides," he warned. "They'll hit the south gate in minutes." Torres' voice crackled back. "Understood. We'll hold." Ethan shifted his position, adjusting his scope to the southern path. The first wave arrived in a blur, Dravnik's warriors cloaked in rippling shields, blades gleaming in the moonlight. Ethan fired twice, each shot finding its mark. The soldiers below followed his lead, unleashing a wave of gunfire that shredded the charging invaders. The second wave came faster, and this time the Dravniks employed holographic decoys, twisted duplicates of soldiers flickering in and out of existence. Confusion spread across the lines. One of the rookies panicked, firing wildly at a ghostly figure that vanished on contact. The real enemy struck moments later, emerging from the blind spot. Ethan fired desperately, cursing as he tried to cover the breach. One of the Dravniks leapt the barricade and drove a curved blade into a soldier's chest before Ethan's bullet found its skull. The soldier crumpled beside the corpse. Ethan swore again and shifted his focus to the next wave. For hours, the battle raged, smoke and flame choking the air. The Dravniks pushed relentlessly, retreating only to regroup and attack again. The soldiers were battered and exhausted, but they held firm. The ground was littered with Dravniks' corpses, their twisted armor glinting in the firelight. As dawn crept over the horizon, Ethan spotted something new, a figure standing on the far ridge, taller and broader than the others. Its armor gleamed black as polished stone, and its glowing eyes burned brighter than any Dravniks Ethan had seen. The warlord. The figure raised one clawed hand, and the battered Dravniks warriors rallied around it. Energy surged from the warlord's palm, forming a spiraling vortex of crackling light. The air vibrated with pressure as a new wave of figures emerged from the swirling portal, fresh Dravniks reinforcements armed with heavier armor and powerful weapons. Ethan adjusted his aim, locking the warlord in his sights. He steadied his breath, calculated the wind, and fired. The bullet struck the warlord's shoulder, but the armor barely buckled. The warlord turned its gaze directly toward Ethan's position. Moments later, the air split with a crackling blast, and Ethan felt the ground buckle beneath him. The ridge exploded in a burst of energy, sending him tumbling down the slope. He hit the ground hard, his rifle lost in the debris. Blood trickled down his face, and his limbs throbbed with pain. Dazed, Ethan staggered to his feet just in time to see the warlord striding toward the base. Its hand rose again, the swirling energy building in its palm. Ethan knew there was no time to regroup, no time to warn Torres. The warlord was preparing to destroy the entire base. Desperate, Ethan reached into his gear and grabbed his last makeshift EMP grenade. The device was unstable, wires barely holding it together. He sprinted toward the warlord, weaving between wreckage and corpses. The warlord's burning eyes locked onto him, and Ethan felt the pressure building, a sickening hum that rattled his skull. At the last moment, Ethan dove forward, twisting the grenade's wires together. The blast erupted, shorting out the warlord's energy surge and forcing its armor to flicker violently. The warlord staggered back, momentarily vulnerable. Gasping for breath, Ethan grabbed a fallen pistol and fired. The bullet struck the warlord's exposed core, punching through its chest. The towering figure stumbled, molten blood spilling from its wound, and collapsed in a heap of scorched metal and twisted limbs. The remaining Dravniks' forces faltered. Some fled into the forest, their numbers shattered. The surviving soldiers regrouped, clearing the battlefield in grim silence. Ethan leaned against a smoking wall, clutching his side where pain flared with every breath. Torres approached, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. "You did it," she said, voice heavy with relief. "Not yet," Ethan muttered, staring toward the sky. The stars flickered unnaturally, shifting like shadows in water. "They're still coming," he said. "And next time, they won't stop." The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence felt wrong. The smoke hung in thick clouds, drifting across the ruins of the old military base. Bodies, both human and alien, littered the ground. The air reeked of scorched metal and blood, and the faint crackle of still burning fires seemed to whisper of unfinished business. Ethan stood in the wreckage, gripping his side where a deep gash burned with each breath. His ribs ached, his muscles screamed, but the pain hardly registered. His gaze was locked on the distant sky. The faint flicker of unnatural light still shimmered beyond the clouds, a distorted pulse like the beating of a vast mechanical heart. They weren't finished yet. Whatever force was hiding up there in orbit hadn't been stopped, only delayed. The warlord was dead, their ground assault crushed, but the Dravniks had more resources, more soldiers, and no intention of retreating quietly. Ethan knew this wasn't over. Captain Torres approached, her face streaked with soot and exhaustion. Her voice was strained but steady. "Command's pulling survivors back. They're regrouping in the city." She paused, reading Ethan's expression. "You're not leaving, are you?" Ethan shook his head. They've still got something up there. Whatever's in orbit isn't just watching. It's waiting. We can't fight what we can't see, Torres said, frustration bleeding into her voice. Satellites are still dark. We don't even know what's coming. We'll know soon enough, Ethan muttered. His gaze shifted back to the ruined transmitter. Its core was dead, but scattered parts lay strewn across the ground, fragments of their jamming technology. An idea began to form in his mind. For the next few hours, Ethan worked with a quiet determination. He dug through the twisted metal remains, salvaging cables, circuit boards, and scorched emitters. Vale, still wounded but determined, limped over to help. The Dravnik's defector seemed oddly calm, as though accepting whatever came next. You're wasting time, Vale muttered as Ethan stripped wires and pieced the damaged tech together. That craft up there is designed to wipe out entire cities. When they strike, it will be over in seconds. Then I need them to hesitate, Ethan replied, barely looking up. I need them to think they're already exposed. Vale's brow furrowed. You're building a decoy? Something like that, Ethan said. Hours passed as Ethan constructed his trap, a web of salvaged transmitters and power cells repurposed into a crude but powerful electromagnetic array. It wasn't designed to emit a clear signal. It was meant to blind whatever was up there. If he could convince the warship that Earth's defenses were more prepared than they actually were, maybe they'd delay their strike, or better yet, reveal their position long enough for someone to respond. As the last wires were twisted into place, Vale limped closer. You know this won't hold them forever, Vale said quietly. I know, Ethan muttered. That night, the sky turned blood red. The flickering pulse above the clouds intensified, casting shifting shadows across the treetops. The warship was moving now, repositioning itself directly above them. Ethan lay flat on his stomach on the ridge, staring down his rifle's scope. The air vibrated with a low hum, and faint distortions rippled across the sky like oil on water. The ship was enormous, easily the size of a small city, and it moved with unnatural grace. Its hull seemed to pulse with sickly green light, and beneath its belly, a gathering glow indicated its weapon systems were preparing to fire. Ethan's fingers hovered over the detonator for his makeshift device. The timing had to be perfect. If he activated it too early, the Dravniks would realize it was a bluff. Too late, and they'd strike before the illusion could buy them any time. The glow beneath the warship brightened, focusing into a deadly beam. Ethan's thumb pressed down. Sparks erupted from the array as power surged through the twisted cables. The field ignited, pulsing waves of electromagnetic interference rippling through the air. The ship's targeting array faltered for a moment, flickering as confused patterns danced across its hull. The warship shifted slightly, adjusting its position, trying to lock onto a target that no longer seemed clear. Come on, Ethan muttered. Buy it. Just for a minute. The warship hesitated. The energy buildup stalled, its beam flickering unstable. A signal flickered back in response, an automated pulse from orbit. The Dravniks had reacted to the decoy. They were scanning now, unsure if they were walking into a trap. That hesitation was everything Ethan needed. Captain Torres' voice crackled through his radio. We've got a missile platform back online, she reported. One shot, maximum payload. Can you give us coordinates? Ethan stared through his scope, tracking the ship's distorted glow. Marking target now, he said, dialing in the coordinates with trembling fingers. Send it. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The warship, still hesitating, began repositioning itself again. Its main weapon system shifted focus, no longer locked on the burning base. The sky trembled with a deep, resonating pulse, the unmistakable sound of an incoming missile. A streak of fire arced through the sky, growing brighter as it closed in on the warship. The ship's hull shimmered, its defensive shields flaring to life. The missile struck with a deafening explosion that split the night. The warship's shields rippled violently, flickering under the sheer force of the blast. The hull buckled, jagged metal twisting and breaking away. For a moment, it seemed to hold, then a secondary blast erupted deep within the ship's core. Fire spilled from its ruptured belly, and the massive craft began to list, dragging downward in a spiraling descent. It struck the earth with a cataclysmic crash, sending a wave of dust and debris across the forest. For several long moments, no one spoke. The fires crackled. The sky was dark once more. Ethan's shoulders sagged as he exhaled heavily, finally allowing the tension to leave his body. In the aftermath, survivors gathered at the battered base. Soldiers patched wounds, extinguished fires, and mourned the fallen. Vale, bleeding badly from reopened wounds, sat slumped against a tree. Ethan knelt beside him. "You kept your word," Vale muttered weakly. "They won't stop coming, though. They'll regroup. Stronger. We'll be ready," Ethan said quietly. Days later, Ethan stood on a quiet hilltop overlooking the valley. The wreckage of the warship still smoldered in the distance, a grim reminder that the Dravniks were far from defeated. Captain Torres joined him, standing quietly at his side. "They want you back in command," she said. "Full reinstatement." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not that guy anymore." "You're exactly that guy," Torres replied. "And we need you." Ethan stared at the horizon for a long moment before answering. "If they come back," he said quietly, "I'll be here." As Torres turned to leave, Ethan knelt to retrieve his rifle, running his fingers along its worn frame. He slung it over his shoulder and looked out at the horizon once more. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, the Dravniks were regrouping. He knew this was only the beginning. "Let them come," Ethan muttered, and walked back into the forest. The air was colder than usual as Ethan Shaw stood outside his cabin, staring at the smoldering wreckage of the Dravniks' warship in the distant hills. Weeks had passed since the battle, but the memory still clung to him like smoke. The twisted metal husk sat in the valley like a tombstone, a reminder that Earth's victory was temporary. The Dravniks would return, and when they did, they wouldn't come with scattered forces and half-finished plans. They would strike with precision and overwhelming force. Ethan had spent those weeks reinforcing the cabin, turning it into something closer to a bunker. Steel plates now reinforced the walls, and the windows had been sealed with bulletproof glass. Solar panels and backup generators powered his security system, and beneath the floor, ammunition crates lined a hidden compartment. It was the kind of preparation only a man who expected war would make. Ethan didn't feel like a soldier anymore, but instinct told him war was still coming. Late one evening, as Ethan cleaned his rifle at the kitchen table, his radio crackled. Captain Torres' voice came through, tense and strained. "Ethan, we've got a problem." He reached for the radio, already dreading the answer. "Tell me." "Survivors," she said grimly. "Not ours. Dravnik scouts, at least a dozen. They've been spotted moving through the mountain pass. Whatever they're planning, it's big." Ethan exhaled slowly. "They're scouting for something," he muttered. "Or someone. We think they're looking for Vale," Torres added. "If he's still alive, they'll want to silence him before he gives us more information." Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Vale had been wounded badly during the last battle. He hadn't seen him since, but Torres had mentioned Vale's condition had worsened. If the Dravniks were hunting him, they weren't going to take prisoners. "I'll find him," Ethan said without hesitation. The following night, Ethan found himself deep in the wilderness, trekking through shadowed valleys and winding trails. The frost-bitten air clung to his skin, and his breath fogged in the dim moonlight. The silence of the woods felt unnatural, as if the animals themselves knew better than to linger. His rifle was strapped tightly to his back, and his pistol rested heavy on his hip. Hours of tracking finally brought him to a small clearing at the base of a rocky hill. Faint footprints marked the mud, and a smear of dark blood traced a path toward a nearby cave. Ethan knelt by the trail, examining the signs. Whoever had left it was moving slowly, and bleeding heavily. It had to be Vale. He followed the trail carefully, pistol drawn as he crept deeper into the cavern. The walls pressed in around him, the air thick and stale. The faint glow of a fire flickered from deeper inside. Ethan moved carefully, stepping over loose stones, until he saw Vale slump near the flames. Vale's breathing was shallow, his body wrapped in bloody bandages. The alien skin, once a sleek charcoal gray, was now cracked and dull. His eyes flickered open as Ethan knelt beside him. "You shouldn't have come," Vale rasped. "They're hunting you," Ethan said. "I couldn't leave you out here." "They won't stop," Vale whispered. "They're not just scouts. They're assassins." Before Ethan could respond, a faint shuffle of movement echoed from the cave entrance. He froze, listening as the sound grew louder. Footsteps, careful, precise. They weren't alone. Ethan extinguished the fire with his boot and pushed Vale deeper into the shadows. The faint shimmer of distorted air appeared at the cave's entrance, a Dravnik scout. Its cloak flickered slightly as it moved inside, scanning the darkness. Ethan gripped his pistol tightly, waiting for the right moment. The scout moved closer, its glowing eyes flickering in the dark. Ethan fired once, and the bullet hit its core. The figure staggered, its cloak flaring before vanishing completely. The creature crumpled to the floor. But before Ethan could react, two more shimmering shapes appeared behind it. Ethan fired again, retreating deeper into the cave. The tight space gave him the advantage. The Dravniks couldn't maneuver easily. He grabbed a loose stone and hurled it across the cave, creating a sharp clatter. The scouts turned toward the sound, and Ethan fired twice more. One went down, the other leapt forward, swinging a curved blade. Ethan barely dodged the strike, feeling the blade slice the air an inch from his face. The scout lunged again, but this time Ethan was ready. He sidestepped, shoving the creature into the wall and firing into its back. The distorted figure flickered, then collapsed. The silence returned, broken only by Vale's ragged breathing. Ethan knelt beside him again, checking his pulse. It was weak, but steady. "You need medical help," Ethan said. "You won't last much longer out here." "You must listen," Vale whispered, gripping Ethan's wrist. "There's more coming. Their warship wasn't just a vessel, it was a signal beacon. They've already sent for reinforcements." Ethan's mind raced. If reinforcements were coming, Earth's defenses were still in no shape to handle another invasion. The cities hadn't recovered, military resources were stretched thin, and the government was barely functioning in some areas. A second wave could overwhelm what little defense they had left. "Where are they landing?" Ethan asked urgently. "Not landing," Vale muttered weakly. "They won't make the same mistake. They'll strike from orbit bombardment." The word chilled Ethan to his core. Orbital strikes, powerful enough to destroy entire cities without ever touching the ground. If the Dravniks chose that path, there would be no hiding. "We have to warn them," Ethan said. "Torres, command, someone has to hear this." "They'll never believe you in time," Vale said. "They'll act too late." Ethan felt a sharp dread settle in his chest. He knew Vale was right. Bureaucracy moved too slowly. By the time Earth's leaders agreed to a course of action, entire regions could be reduced to ash. "There's another way," Vale whispered. "Their orbital station has a command core, a targeting system that controls their bombardments. Disable it, and they'll be blind." "How do I reach it?" Ethan asked. Vale closed his eyes for a long moment, then weakly tapped a small, blood-stained datapad strapped to his side. "Coordinates, access points, all here. But you'll never make it alone." "I've done plenty alone," Ethan said. "You won't win with a rifle," Vale warned. "You'll need help. You'll need her." Ethan knew who Vale meant, Captain Torres. He hated the idea of pulling her back into this mess, but he also knew Vale was right. This wasn't a battle he could win from a ridge with a sniper rifle. This was something bigger, something only a team could handle. He gathered the datapad, helped Vale to his feet, and began the slow walk back toward the base. Every step felt heavier than the last. The shadow of war loomed over them, closer than ever. That night, as they reached the outskirts of the battered military base, Ethan stood quietly outside Torres' command tent. He knew what he had to ask, and he knew what it would cost. "Let them come," Ethan muttered to himself. This time, he was going to be ready.